Hello everyone, good evening again, and welcome to SUBU's MP Spotlight. This event is part of SUBU's ambition to empower as many students as possible to participate in democratic process and make their voices heard on issues that matter to them. Hence, we have our members of parliament here today with us and you yourself. My name is Esther Chineye Isaiah and I'm your student union president. This evening, I've been given a very easy job: introduce the event and sit down. And you here are expected to engage the MPs and ask questions on issues that are very dear to your heart. Also, I'm very delighted to be joined by Professor Aina Toyson. Say hello. The Executive Dean. So Aina is the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Media and Communication, who will be sharing this forum. The last time we had Jessica and Tom in this room was when they were campaigning for their current role. And the 2024 UK general election saw the Labour Party achieve an overwhelming majority, turning Bournemouth and Poole red for the first time ever. Their manifestos included plans to tackle knife crime and create safer high streets, to cut NHS waiting times, to tackle the cost of living by bringing down bills, and to break down barriers to opportunity. But before we start tonight's event, I would like to go through a few housekeeping rules and explain how this event is going to work. There are no planned fire alarm drills for tonight, and we expect you note the exits at the back, the two exits. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building and follow event staff instruction. We will be recording and taking pictures throughout the event, and this may be made public on social media and the press. The discussion tonight will be split into 4 stages, each lasting 20 minutes and guided by teams created from student feedback we collected and approved by SUBU Executive Committee. Those themes are jobs and employment in the local area, crime and violence against women in Bournemouth, NHS mental health, loneliness and the health of young people and students, housing and accommodation. This evening is an open floor where you ask questions. You can raise your hand and ask the MPs any question that you have. So now I would like to pass the microphone to our lovely MPs to introduce themselves in 2 minutes.
Thank you. Is that on? It is. Thank you, Esther. My name's Neil Duncan-Jordan. I'm the Labour MP for Poole in Dorset. I have dubious honour of having got in with a majority of 18 votes. So I don't think many people expected me to be here, least of which my Conservative opponent. I am an alumni of Bournemouth University. I studied in, I think I graduated in 1996. I studied journalism here and then went on to work in the media before working in politics and then becoming a trade union official. Bournemouth University is a bit different to how I remember it. It's got a lot bigger buildings than it had when I was here originally. I suppose in many respects because of that it's more professional and the facilities are a lot better than they were in 1995-96, that's for sure. And I gave an interview just earlier before we started about the importance of education. Before I came here this evening, I went to an Open University graduation ceremony in the Lighthouse in Poole, which is in my constituency, and to see the range of people from the different backgrounds and ages celebrating their achievements and securing a degree or diploma or whatever it was truly joyous. It was really wonderful to see people who've worked hard and have got something as a result of that. Hopefully that they then go on to use maybe in a career or whatever. But because the Open University addresses and attracts all ages, you had people in their 70s and 80s getting degrees this afternoon. And to see that alongside young people in their 20s doing that shows the power of education and how important it is. So I absolutely relished my time when I was here all those years ago, and it did set me, I'm not saying it set me on the path to being an MP, but it certainly set me on a different career than if I hadn't have come. So if you've got the opportunity, absolutely take it.
Hello everyone, I'm Jessica Toale, the MP in Bournemouth West. So if you live on campus, if you live in the town centre, Winton, Wallisdown, I'm your local MP. So of course, if you have any challenges or issues, you come to me. Because of the nature of my seat, a lot of what I work on is the town centre. So I'm really focused on how we improve Bournemouth Town Centre, how we really champion the diverse local economy we have here, and the universities are really central to that because of the amazing things happening here in creative industries, in the digital and technological industries, and how we see that cropping up and growing in different parts of our local economy. So whenever I talk about Bournemouth, most people think of it as a kind of sleepy seaside retirement town. I always like to talk about just how diverse and just how dynamic it is as a place. The flip side of that, however, is the second most common thing I talk about is crime and antisocial behaviour. So spending a lot of time campaigning on issues like knife crime. I know we're going to talk about women's sexual violence and violence against women and a little bit as well. So those are two big issues for me. How do we diversify and grow our local economy? How do we make our town centre safe? But how do we make all of our neighbourhoods safe and make Bournemouth that place that people really want to come, live and stay and work and thrive? And from your perspectives, I hope that if you've done your degree in Bournemouth and you're not originally from Bournemouth, you fall in love with the place, you want to stay here, and you can find great jobs and affordable places to live. So these are all things that we're campaigning for here, because I think there's so much potential in Bournemouth and in Poole. And like I said, the universities have got to be a really strong pillar of that. So looking forward to taking all your questions. I know it's Parliament Week, so it's really great that you're here to learn a bit more about what we do as MPs, how our UK parliamentary system works, but also how you can get involved and make a difference in your communities as well. Thanks. Have you got anything?
Hello. It's great to be here. I want to thank you all for coming today. It's obviously UK Parliament Week, and you're giving up your Friday evenings to spend time with your local MPs to find out about how Parliament works. So I want to say a special thank you for doing that. For me, the Labour government cannot achieve a single thing without universities like Bournemouth University. It's as simple as that. We can't fix our NHS problems without having more professional medics to actually staff our NHS wards and our doctor's surgeries and our dentist surgeries. We can't tackle knife crime without having the university really engaged with the work that's happening at the town level, and the list goes on. And under the leadership of Bournemouth University, I think we're going to see a significant role being played by higher education in our town in fixing a lot of the problems that we've inherited. Now, we're going to get into all of the issues that the university, the student union, had raised as being important to discuss, so I don't want to talk for too long in these remarks. But I do want to dwell on one thing, which is for 2 years I was a candidate, and that involved doing things like coming to this room and talking with students such as yourself about how we can make Bournemouth and Britain better. And in this room, and when I was knocking on doors, I pretty much heard the same thing. And if you had to sum those things up in one word, it was hopelessness. It was a feeling that nothing works. The problems are too big to fix. Politicians are all the same. You're one person, we like you, but how do we know you'll make a difference? And the challenge for all three of us is to turn what we promised into reality. Because unless we actually deliver the change that we promised to bring, you will see our town and our country become yet more hopeless. And that's why you coming out on a Friday night to spend time with your local MPs in UK Parliament Week matters so much. Because we know that we've got in the world growing insecurity. We know that we've got in our country a difficult inheritance to fix. But unless we all join together and we recommit to our democracy and we commit to fixing our public services and we talk about how we can put our town back on track and how we make our country thrive, we're not going to have the bright futures that every single person in this room deserves. So as your MP, in this town, and there will be some of you in this room who I represent, I want to make sure that your voice is heard in the halls of democracy. I want to make sure that when we go to Downing Street, your opinions are being received and acted upon. And I want to make sure that when we're standing again for re-election, you feel like there's been a material difference in our town, that it's safer, that you can get the healthcare you deserve, that you're seeing our classrooms being filled with children who are learning and not losing out on opportunity, that we're seeing our climate crisis finally being tackled, that we're seeing the private rented sector, which makes up so much of our housing stock in this town, improving in quality and affordability, that you're feeling like you can actually have opportunities to get on and have a job that you feel like you can thrive in. So I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. I'm looking forward to having a debate. And I think this is just one of those first steps in trying to put our country right by talking about how we fix our problems.
Thank you so much for coming all the way, because it meant a lot that you came here for debate, and when we extended this invitation, you also agreed to come here. So thank you for coming to spend your Friday evening with us. So now I would like to pass the microphone to Aina, and just a reminder, please, this is an open floor. If you have a question, do not hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you to all of you for those opening remarks, and thank you again for being here, and thank you all for being here and taking the time to be here as well. As Esther noted, this evening is an open floor question that will be guided by 4 themes just to help kind of focus our discussions, about roughly 20 minutes for each of those themes. And those are your themes, okay? So whilst I'm here to sort of humbly facilitate those questions and so forth, really they are all come out of your ideas and what you want to ask the MPs. I'm going to try and be a little bit focused on that and try and keep them to time. Time is of the essence, but that's also to make sure that as many questions get asked as possible. I would ask that we all remain respectful and considerate of one another, and just be courteous to fellow audience members, of course. If you do wish to ask a question of our panel, please raise your hand and you'll be given a microphone. There should be a roaming microphone, or there will be one imminently. Zach's over there with one now. But please, we also ask that there will be no calling out or heckling of audience members and panelists this evening as well. So please wait until you get the microphone to ask your questions. So without further ado, let's jump into some questions. What we'll do is I'll do a preamble for each of the themes, and then I'll ask the first question, and then we'll open it up for you to ask your questions. But that gives you a little bit of time to think about the kind of questions that you want to ask. So the first one is jobs and employment in the local area. From research SUBU has completed, we've seen a 49% decline of students on a year-long placement at BU over the past years, and this is partly due to lack of suitable opportunities in the local area. Similarly, large proportions of graduates are moving away from the area after graduation, mostly to London, South East, in search of higher paid and better quality jobs, leading to obviously net loss in Bournemouth and Poole. So the first question, and I'll ask this for Jessica, how do you plan to improve job prospects for current students and recent graduates in Bournemouth and Poole?
Well, thank you for that, and for the preamble, which has put into context a little bit the challenge that we face in Bournemouth and in Dorset more broadly. Dorset is an ageing county, so certainly all of the MPs in the area have this as an issue. But we're lucky here in BCP that we are a high population concentration. And like I said in my opening remarks, I think there's lots to be hopeful about, lots to build on. And that's with the real diversifying that we're seeing in the economy at the moment. So there are challenges, yes. It is difficult to command wages in here in BCP that compete with London and compete with Bristol. And you have very high cost of living in the BCP area. So that makes it less attractive for people to stay in the area. But what I see now, which I think is really positive, is that within our economy, yes, we have a very vibrant retail, hospitality and leisure sector. We've got a large English language and further education and higher education sector, but we're seeing these bright sparks. Along the Lansdowne, we've got some really amazing creative industries companies who are hoping to expand and hoping to use the specialist skills that are coming out of both Bournemouth University and out of AUB. We've also got burgeoning tech sector. We've got a really strong financial sector in Bournemouth, which is really unique to us actually. Outside of London, we are a massive hub for these sectors, and not a lot of people know that. So I sort of see it as my job to be a champion for Bournemouth and to wave the flag for these amazing opportunities and industries we have here, but also to try to get people to come in and put their jobs here and to bring the investment in that we need in this area to get the jobs. And I think part of that is really championing what you're doing here at the university, the real high skills that you're developing. And I've loved seeing the number of industry partnerships actually that you're developing at the moment. I think that's a really, really positive move for the future. When I came here last, I came to the Media and Communications department, and I think you were doing partnerships with sort of a local engineering company, another one with Sunseeker, with a local production company. And so all of that creates a pathway, a very, very clear pathway for students to contribute back into the local economy. And I hope create those really high-skilled jobs that we need here and to grow those sectors so that you start to see the types of economies of scale in the sectors that you do in places like London and Bristol and, say, Manchester. So I have a lot of hope and faith in this growth that we're going to see. And I think the universities are key. I think us as MPs championing the real unique position that we hold as well as part of that. And around that, all of the things that we're going to do and we hope to do with this government are make it a safer place to live, improve the health outcomes, improve opportunities for young families, and that will make it all a much more attractive place for people to come as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So we'll open up then to questions from the floor. Who wants to go first? What question at the back there? If we can. If you can just briefly say your name and then who you're addressing the question to, that'd be great. Thank you.
Nicholas Grongas, and this is addressed to Jessica Toole. So one of the issues I have when I walk around Bournemouth, especially Lansdowne, is that I see what used to be a lot of office buildings. They have these to let signs on them. No one buys them up. They become increasingly run down, and they become hubs of antisocial behaviour. And it's not just office buildings. I'm starting to see, even just from last year, more and more empty retail units. And I don't seem to be any local businesses replacing them. I see all this investment into student accommodation. I don't see much into local affordable housing for the people of Bournemouth. Not only that, but it seems, as far as I can tell, Bournemouth seems so dependent on the university for economic growth. There doesn't seem to be much for an actual industry. When I look around the different shops I see in Bournemouth, I don't see many local businesses. All of them seem to be struggling. I only see chains, and even then, a lot of them seem to be closing their branches in Bournemouth and relocating somewhere else. And so my question is, what are you going to do to make Bournemouth a thriving hub of local businesses, whether that's hospitality, retail, the creative arts? What will you do to solve that issue?
Okay, thank you. Jessica again.
I think you've touched on a lot of challenges we're facing, and of course Tom and Neil will have views as well, because they, Neil's got Poole Town Centre, which is doing some great stuff, also has some challenges, and Tom's got Boscombe and a couple of other district centres, which some are really thriving, some need a bit of work. But the things that you've touched on that are really interesting are, one, there's a broader trend about high streets around the UK that have suffered over a number of years, but particularly since COVID, and Bournemouth hasn't been immune to that. Bournemouth, of course, has some specific challenges. It has a really unusual geography for a town centre. It's got this kind of propeller shape, which makes it difficult to concentrate activity and investment in one area. And it has quite big units. It's got all these big empty department stores. And the sort of department store model for retail centres has really changed. And if you think about the way people use their town centres, it's not so much to go shopping anymore, because we have online shops, they're Castle Point in the area, but people come to town centres to experience things and to do things. And one of the things that we have to do is reimagine the high street. Bournemouth also has a challenge where we've got lots of independent landlords which are sort of difficult to manage from a town centre perspective. So what am I doing? It's a big question. I think part of what's really, really missing in Bournemouth, and the same in a lot of our town centres across the conurbation, is that the council hasn't necessarily set out a clear vision for what they want the future of the town to be. If you ask anyone now what they think Bournemouth is famous for, nobody can answer it. So I spend a lot of time with my local businesses trying to understand the challenges they face, and a lot of it is really high rents, really high rates, really high business energy costs, not enough footfall, antisocial behaviour puts off customers, it also makes it difficult for businesses to do their work. So I think there's one element of things which is, okay, right, how do we develop a really clear forward vision for what we want Bournemouth to be, how we want it to grow, to send out a clear message to businesses, to investors, to local residents about what that is. I think that has to have a really strong pillar around the arts and culture and our cultural institutions. I think it has to have a really strong pillar around homegrown local businesses and brands, because there's lots of it. It's just trying to encourage people to take a risk on a place. There's obviously got to be an element of tackling antisocial behaviour and crime. And a lot of businesses are kind of working in tandem on that at the moment. And we spend a lot of time talking to the police about ways that we can make the town centre feel safer. If you get in more footfall, that will obviously help a little bit with that. There's a third pillar of making sure people can actually live in the town centre as well, because you create a kind of natural buzz that way, and you create natural customers for cafes, for businesses. And then overarching all of this, what we can do as MPs is make sure that the right type of regulations and legislation's coming through to really help all of that. So one of the things that I was really excited about in the campaign, and which we're trying to do now, is to completely reform the business rates regime, which means it will be easier for companies to get in and take a shop on the high street. We've also just introduced new regulations to allow communities and councils to take over empty buildings if they've been empty for more than a year. So try to stimulate some of that activity. And working with the bids on trying to get a few meanwhile spaces in the town centre to prove that a bit of activity can make a real difference. So I think there's some really bright sparks in Bournemouth Town Centre. So Patch has just opened in Bobby's. There's a whole bunch of activity going on in there. That will bring more co-working into the town centre. The Echo building's another really great example. Completely renovating the House of Fraser building. So yes, above it's going to be student accommodation, but that's really good to have people in the town centre. Underneath, they're splitting up the whole ground floor into 9 different commercial smaller units to try to get more small local businesses in. So I think if we can really try to champion some of these good things that are happening, we start to turn the tables a little bit, and we start to tackle all together that issue of the emptiness, the antisocial behaviour. And, you know, my hope is that by the end of this 5 years as a parliament, we ask people, what do you think about town centre now? And they don't say to me, oh, I never go in, there's nothing to go for. They say, oh, actually, there's a few things that I really like there now. Oh, great, no, it's really great to see this new business opened. So again, it's our role as MPs being a kind of convening force, but also trying to really champion those good things that are happening at the moment.
Neil, I think you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I just wanted to follow on in terms of Poole, and Jess made a point about that. For years, Poole High Street was a real dive. I mean, let's be honest about that. It was, you know, when Woolworths went, everything went. You know, I'm going back a few years. And what replaced it was lots of charity shops, which isn't really what people, yeah, I like a charity shop myself, I have to say, but, you know, that's not really going to bring in loads of people into your area. What happened was Legal & General, who owned the Dolphin Centre, which is our main shopping centre, and some of the streets around that, the Kingland area, just outside the shopping centre, had the idea of having all these empty properties, and they needed they needed someone in there, because if they didn't fill that space, it would turn into the sort of problems that you mentioned. You know, antisocial behaviour, they become areas where people congregate, there's a lot of, you know, drunks and drug taking and so on and so forth. So, you know, let's have a proper shop in there rather than it just an empty space. And Legal & General took a a gamble actually, and said that they could have the units without any rent for 2 years to see if they could make a go of the business. And if they didn't, well then Legal and General took that on the chin and the company folded. But if they did, then of course they were tied in to Legal and General, paying them then their rates and so on, you know, their rent and so on. And I have to say, most of those businesses survived, which was a really interesting sort of example of what you can do. But you've got to take a gamble. You know, it's not a guarantee that it's going to be successful. So it was a really positive move. The Dolphin Centre itself has also seen a regeneration. They've brought inside a load of street food stalls to encourage people to shop and socialise at the same time, which I think is a smart move. And on top of that, it's also brought in lots of NHS services. So there's a wellbeing service there. There's a sort of a walking clinic there. So people are doing their shopping. They think, actually, I don't feel too good. I think I'll go and have a chat with somebody in the clinic. These are ways in which people are going to go there. There's going to become a destination for people. And so it's examples like that that I think are really quite positive, and they're everywhere, not just, I'm only giving my example. And we need to be more creative in the way that Legal and General were creative 2-3 years ago. We need more of that, I think, to try and assist our town centres.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to take a couple of more questions from the audience. I'll probably take 2 in succession, just mindful of time, and I want to get as many as possible. So, lady in the red all the way there. Just realised you're both in red, actually.
Hi, I'm Liv. There's currently a funding crisis in higher education in the UK, with closures of humanities and social sciences courses, with a prediction of 10,000 job losses in the sector. This has already affected Bournemouth, where the BA Politics course has been suspended for 2025. With these courses vital for informed citizenship and democratic engagement, how will the government protect these degrees and ensure they remain accessible, especially for lower income students in areas like Bournemouth? Please help me save my degree.
Okay, thank you. So take another question.
Hiya, I'm Yaz, I'm a youth advocate, and my question to you is more about the younger side of young people, between the ages of 11 to 18, and it's about work experience placement. So a lot of young people are starting to go into the bigger world, find jobs, and trying to find placements to experience how the world works. And I've had a lot of young people report that when they're under 16, they cannot get a work experience placement due to safeguarding, due to not being able to get insurance, and a multitude of other reasons. So how can we ensure that under 16-year-olds actually get the same opportunities as people who are over 16, and how can we ensure that young people get to experience our world, politics, and also outside of politics, and really ensure that young people get to experience before they actually commit to something?
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I'm sort of trying to round up this topic. No, that's good. Okay, so the first one is really around social sciences and humanities and the sort of funding crisis in higher education. Who wants to go on that one?
I'll have a go.
Neil, go on.
Yeah, well, before... Is it on?
Oh, sorry, I
Oh, sorry.
turned it off.
That's okay. Before I became an MP, I was a trade union official with responsibility for, among other things, higher education in the southeast. So it didn't include Bournemouth because that's in the southwest, but it did include 15 universities in the southeast, including Southampton, Solent, Portsmouth, and so on, Winchester, and so on. And during the 5 years that I was in charge of that, it was very clear that the sector was absolutely struggling, and there's no doubt about that. You know, the student, the course fees hadn't gone up for 10 years or thereabouts, and I was seeing more and more redundancies coming through, more and more portfolio reviews, and a reduction in the offer that was being made, so courses were being cut. That was leading to staff being laid off. Solent, I'll just share this, Solent had an idea a concept which I didn't support, which has failed as well, I think, in all honesty, which was fewer, bigger, better. That was their slogan. So fewer courses, but you get more people on those courses, and that will be they will be sort of exemplars. They will be sort of really top-notch courses. Well, the fact is that when a university looks like it's contracting, nobody wants to go. So this idea that fewer was going to attract people was nonsense, and it didn't work. So a university that's cutting back on its portfolio, I would argue, is in serious trouble, because if you don't look attractive and have this range and offer for students in the future, they won't come. They'll look elsewhere where there is a range, where there are more interesting degrees. I just want to say something about the political atmosphere around higher education as well. For too long, we've allowed, particularly the right in this country, to attack degrees and call them things like Mickey Mouse when they were things like media studies and sociology. I think we have to refute that. I mean, I made the point in an interview earlier today, there is value in education for its own sake, in my view. Mm-hmm. Not everything has to lead to a career or a job or whatever. Tell that to the 80-year-old who just picked up their Open University degree this afternoon. They're not trying to get a job somewhere. They're doing it because they think it's expanding their mind, it's making them a more rounder individual, that they enjoy the process of learning. That's what we need to be celebrating. And so I think we need more courses, not fewer courses. We need more diversity of courses, and we need the courses like art history just as much as we need dentistry, okay? And the argument that we've had, I think, in recent years is that we only need those courses which contribute to the economy in some way, like, you know, manufacturing or whatever. I actually think we need to widen our perspective. For a society to function properly, it needs to have a much broader base than just work all the time. You know, we need to understand that we're human beings who have lots of elements to our lives. Work is one of them, but it's not the only one. And we shouldn't always think that university just has to be about careers and a career path and getting a job at the end of it. We have to have philosophy courses which allow people to think about the world. We have to have art courses that allow people to interpret the world. You know, we have to have all of those things as well as all the practical stuff as well. So, you know, I'm worried to hear that your course is under threat. I think that's a backward step personally. You know, I'm hoping the union's going to obviously be doing something about that as a former trade union official. But we have to invest in these sort of courses, in my view, because you're right. One of the problems that I think we face in UK society, and I went to a Institute for Government lecture this week about the lack of trust in our democracy. And where does that lead us? It leads us ultimately to Trump being elected in America, and I don't want to see that in the UK.
Can I just jump on the back of that as well? That last point about, you know, learning about how our system works, how you engage, a really strong pillar of our campaign, and one of the missions we have for the country is to break down barriers to opportunity wherever they are. And that means giving everybody, no matter what their background is, what their aspirations are, the ability to achieve those. And so university is 100% a part of that, but so is thinking about further education and apprenticeships and the school curriculum in itself. So if we want well-rounded individuals, it has to start much earlier as well. You know, getting into schools, making sure there's a diverse curriculum that looks at citizenship and politics, but also arts, also sports, as well as your core subjects, to get the well-rounded people we need for a functioning society. And so I'm really, really supportive of that stuff that we're doing earlier. And just last night I was with the Bournemouth Scouts doing a Parliament Week talk, and it was really, really lovely to speak to them about how our Parliament works, how legislation passes, how you get involved in campaigns. And they did a sort of voting practice on what the favourite biscuits were, and so we all got to try biscuits as well, which was great. But it has to happen at all ages, and I think then, you know, then you get a wider variety of courses at university and in college as well available for people, because there's the demand for it as well.
Okay. Tom, can I ask you to come in on that other question? So this is about work experience, placements, and sort of opportunities for young people under 16s and so forth?
Definitely. I think you're raising some pretty key points here, which are often neglected because you don't have a vote. And so Labour's obviously committed to bringing in the vote at the age of 16 for more people to be able to have their say earlier in life. But I think it's also about recognising that even with the vote coming in at 16, you're not, as an age group, going to be engaged on the issues that matter to you, which is problematic. So for me, I'm really excited by some of the things coming out of the government around making sure that we're working with people at an earlier age to ensure that they've got the best possible foundations. So whether it's about breakfast clubs being introduced around the country, whether it's about schools where they've got primary schools where they've got spaces, taking the opportunity up to have nurseries based there, whether it's about supporting rollout of more childcare, whether it's about the prevention agenda, which is not just about making sure that people's diet is more nutritious from an earlier age, but it's also trying to stop some of the things that might get in the way of somebody's growth as a person or their educational opportunities, whether it's about reaching into the home and making sure that a vulnerable child is being spotted earlier, they're getting the support they need in the way that they need it, with some of the children's social care reforms that happened earlier this week when they were announced. So I'm really excited by the prevention agenda. For me, I used to run a mental health, domestic abuse and homelessness charity. So seeing some of the ways in which children and younger people were undoubtedly among the worst victims in families where difficult things were happening, I'm really, really keen for this government to be doing more on that front. I think there's another point about when you're moving up into your teenage years and you're thinking about the choices you'll have to take around your future career. I think there's two bits. First of all, you're probably going to have quite a few careers in your lifetime, as compared with some of the older people who, at the age of 16, were thinking about what profession to take up. They may have one or two careers. You could well have 5 or 6. And I think that's just a symptom of the way in which society is changing. And I think a second thing here is that before you make your first decision about your first career, you need advice and support about that. So I would want the FE sector to be reaching more into secondary schools to give advice at an earlier stage. So there's careers guidance, there's opportunities to shadow in the workplace, but also I'd want bridges to be better between primary and secondary too, particularly for children with special educational needs and disabilities who often find it very hard to migrate from one into the other because they go from one classroom with one teacher into several classrooms and several teachers. We just have to think about the educational journey from start all the way up to FE and then into HE if people choose to go there in a more intelligent way. And that means we've got to listen to people who right now are navigating that journey in a different way that older people have done in the past. So your voice is really, really important in this.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add?
Very briefly.
That we're actually quite fortunate, the three of us, because we've got, I know we're in the university, but actually Bournemouth and Poole College is doing, I think all three of us have been there at different times, and they are doing some fantastic work, particularly in the areas of reaching those, more difficult children to reach, shall we say, young people who've got more acute needs, and they're doing some terrific work. So we are benefiting from that, and we're seeing that. I know they're not a competitor, but I just wanted to throw that in.
Good partner.
Yeah.
So there's lots more hands coming up. Unfortunately, I'm going to move us on, if that's okay, because we want to cover all of the kind of topics, but there is an opportunity for an open question at the end as well. So if you had follow-up questions to these, we can ask those at the end. So we'll move on to the next theme, which is crime, violence against women in Bournemouth. Crime rates in Bournemouth are generally lower when compared to dense central city areas like Bristol, for example. But still, there are over 220 crimes reported on average per month, and around a third of crime is linked to sexual offences, which is by far the most prevalent type of crime and much more prevalent in Bournemouth than in other areas. So my first question, and I know you've been outspoken on this, so I'll come to you. In light of recent concerns about safety in Bournemouth and Poole, particularly for women, what specific measures and plans are you proposing?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously you quoted a lot of Bournemouth figures, which don't necessarily apply to me, but nevertheless. So I was saying earlier that this week I nominated a local entrepreneur from Poole, for an award. So it was a sort of female entrepreneurs award, and she's developed an app called the Foot Bus, which enables primarily young people, but it could be male, female, it could be anyone actually, to see who is in the area where they are, and you can use the app to sort of get in touch with people to make sure that you can walk home together, or you can walk to places together, from the pub to the car park, you know, home or wherever, from work to the car park or whatever. And somebody was telling me that Exeter had something very similar as well. It was a phone line and so on. But Nikki Robinson's developed this Footbus app, and I think it's creative use of technology like that is one of the ways in which we're going to protect ourselves. But of course, it's a real indictment of our society that we need an app to keep us safe when we're walking from the pub to our car or wherever. Whether that, you know, primarily women, I absolutely, and she did develop that firstly with women, but has, you know, widened the app out, because in fact there's a lot of men who actually feel threatened as well, she found in her research, and I accept that. And she also found that there were a lot of people who were lonely and needed someone to walk with and talk with and so on and so forth, and that could be of any age or gender. So, you know, it's those sort of things. And one of the points that I think we need to get back to, you can talk about more police on the street, of course you can, and Labour is committed to those sort of things. You can support you know, women's refuges, and I've had a lot of dealings with Poole Women's Refuge about how we can do more. But ultimately, we're going to have to change the narrative around male views of women in the longer term if we're going to tackle this problem, which means we're going to have to start at a young age with young boys talking about their relationships with women and how they view them, and how we need to get that in a more positive dimension than where it perhaps is at the moment. And of course, the difficulty in saying that as a politician is that that's not an easy fix. That's a generational question. That's a cultural question. You cannot turn that off and on like saying, well, I can recruit 500 new police. That, you know, I know that takes time to recruit them and so on, but you know what I mean? That's a quicker fix than saying, actually, we need a cultural shift. We need a shift in attitudes in this country. And I think we have to be committed to that, but I think we also have to level with the public and say that's going to take a long time.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open that up to the floor then on this topic, crime and violence against women. So I've got one at the front row and then one right behind. So I'll take two questions straight away there.
Hi there, my name's Neil, I'm the Bournemouth officer. So we've had a few things pop up for our attention. So we've been discussing Ask Angela. It's beforehand, but we see the signs, however, it's not working.
That's right.
It isn't working.
That's right.
We go up to the bar stand and say,
It isn't.
hi, it's Angela. It's supposed to be a secret helpline where you can, they're supposed to take you to a safe space, take you away from a potential threat. How do we fix that? And then also, these are, in regards to that, women, not just women, but predominantly women, we're having to learn our own self-defense. Like, we'll carry IDs between our hands. We will shout fire instead of help. We naturally learn these things because we have to in order to get through to where we are. So how can we make women just feel generally safer?
Okay, and I'll take the question in front as well. And I'll take the question in front as well. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rania. I'm one of the men of the League Ambassador and Make Up Champion in the City Council. So my question is, I am a member, I don't really feel safe about me coming to my youth events during the riots and protests those times. So obviously because of stabbing and fighting, so what can you do to like ensure people's safety in the future in terms of these situations? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So two sort of Oh, there was a third question. We can take a third question as well, and then we'll go to...
With reports of underfunding in services for survivors of domestic abuse and sexual violence, what commitments can the government make to ensure that Bournemouth has adequate resources for victim support and prevention programmes?
Okay, thank you. So there's a general theme here, which is, I think, safety in public places, and then it's the support services, be that Ask Angela or victim support and survivor support. Tom, do you want to go first? And actually, I'll probably invite you all to reflect on this.
Yeah, I think what I'd reflect is there are 3 questions there by 3 women talking about how you feel unsafe. And the number one thing I would say is it is not your responsibility to feel safe. It's the responsibility of typically men who are causing you to feel unsafe to change their behaviours. The onus is not on you to do anything different. The onus is on men to sort their stuff out, basically. And the reason I'm saying that is that one of the proudest things I've done is to work alongside women who have been involved in the domestic abuse prevention and victim survivor support world for 40 years, and to see them, and where I possibly could chip in, develop a perpetrator programme which works with men who are low to medium risk, never high risk, but low to medium risk, and help them to understand how their behaviours are abusive. And I've sat in perpetrator group programmes, and I've seen light bulbs go off in men where they knew that they had committed coercive control, financial control, physical violence, but they hadn't recognised it as a pattern of abuse. And when I've sat alongside them and seen them taken through the programme, a rolling programme, 12-week programme, where some people will roll off and new people will come on, and you have that variety of people in that programme, the consequence is that you've got people who are getting towards the end of their time in that intervention, supporting the newer people starting and dispensing all of their learning. And that peer support, it actually is really, really important. As you've got men getting towards the end of their 12-week period, 8 to 12 weeks, saying to the people starting in their first 4 weeks, look lad, stick with this. You're not doing the right thing. Think of your little kiddie. Think of your family. Think of what you want for your life. You've got to stop. That's the most powerful motivation to change. And we've just got to make sure that we invest in those programs, because that's how you stop the low to medium risk perpetrators of domestic abuse. The high risk perpetrators, that involves a whole set of other interventions. But for tackling those men who are typically abusing and are doing it because they've got ingrained reasons, which will often be that they were themselves growing up in families where abusive relationships happened, where they saw their father beating a woman, typically their mother, and they thought that was normal. Nobody told them different. Where they have grown up with trauma in their lives, including that, and so they don't have a way of regulating their emotions. They don't have a way of understanding what they're feeling, and so they lash out and they're aggressive and they hurt people. We've just got to systematically fix the roots that are ingrained, frankly, in misogyny, that are ingrained in a culture that has turned a blind eye to the abuse of women, and that has not dedicated enough time, energy, thought, and frankly care to making sure that 50% of our population are treated equally with dignity and fairness, and that just has to stop. So I want to take my experiences of running that charity and helping to contribute towards that perpetrator programme and the victim survivor interventions, and making sure that Jess Phillips, who knows a thing or two about tackling domestic abuse from having run domestic abuse programmes herself, can work alongside Bridget Phillipson as the Education Secretary, who knows a thing or two, having run a women's refuge, to get this right once and for all. Because we have the opportunity to break the cycle of abuse. We really do. But we've got to invest in it. I will say one thing though. I'm very hopeful that we can tackle that cycle of abuse with sustained programmes of intervention. But there are things that are happening and overarch all of what we will do, which unfortunately we can't control. And that is the pervasive masculinity, the toxic masculinity in social media, the Andrew Tates of the world. And when I was knocking on doors and talking about the hopelessness that I felt in conversations with people, that hopelessness worries me because it can drift towards a dangerous populism. I genuinely feel like if we don't, as a government, deliver on the priorities that people have demanded action on all fronts, we are in danger of our democracy becoming a place of cynicism and mistrust to a greater extent, nothing improving, and people with cheap solutions and easy answers and terrible views and terrible attitudes hijacking our politics. So it's a do or die moment for our democracy. And that's why it's so important that in UK Parliament Week, we do recommit to our democracy. We think together about tackling our problems. We don't just endlessly look in the rear view mirror and try and think about the problems we face, but we are genuinely solutions focused because we've got to get this right.
Jessica.
Thank you. It breaks my heart to hear you say that you don't feel safe in Bournemouth. It really does. Part of the reason I wanted to stand here was that Bournemouth always felt really safe when I was younger. When I used to come here as a teenager, my mum never thought twice about letting me go into the town centre with my friends at any time of the day. I never thought twice about it. And now I meet parents, young people who just say they just don't do it. Doesn't feel safe. There's lots of reasons for that. Tom really eloquently outlined what we need to do to deal with the kind of root cause, and Neil mentioned it as well. I've been talking about this a lot with Dorset Women, which is a local group, and this would address some of the issues you mentioned. So there's a big question about how do we link up the services that exist and the really, really good things that are happening to provide support. And we have to think really creatively when there isn't enough funding to support them. But overarching that, we do have a commitment as a government to halve male violence against women. We've been very specific about how we want to do that by making sure that police have specialist training, that there are rape units within police stations, that there's specialist training for domestic abuse on 999 calls. And so all of those things are real commitments, and making sure that the police have the right training that they need to deal with things like hate crime and misogyny, bringing in new laws to ensure that we're strengthening the legislation around hate crimes and violence against women. So all of those things will sort of create the right circumstances, but we do need to get to that root cause, and I think that's conversations. And I think Saoirse Ronan being on the Graham Norton show the other week really started a conversation in the wider public about just what women face every day, just what they have to think about on a normal basis, and clearly the lads had no idea. So I think getting those things out there and making sure we're having these conversations with both men and women, really, really important to going forward.
Okay, any further questions on this topic before I come to Neil? So there's one more at the back there, and then one here. So Neil, just whilst we're running the microphone.
Oh, okay.
So
You
can answer whilst we're waiting.
Yeah. I just wanted to pick up on the sort of Ask Angela point, because I found out this week what you've just said. I was talking to somebody yesterday about it. He was like a sort of security expert, something like that. And he was telling me that, you know, it is a good idea, but it hasn't worked in practice, and that was really disappointing, I think. And I think it was because largely a lot of outlets didn't know about it. They hadn't sort of bought into it. There was no buy-in, because it's a sort of voluntary scheme, and it just hadn't taken off in that respect. So you had women going to the bar saying, "Oh, you know, can you phone Angela," or whatever, you know, and they were like, "What are you talking about? You know, I don't know any Angela." You know, so it just didn't work. It just didn't work, and that was really, really regrettable. I just want to say one other thing, which is about picking up on the point that sort of Tom and Jess made about the sort of early intervention. There is a curriculum review taking place at the moment by government about education in this country, and I think we do have to start putting these sort of programs into you know, primary schools. We need to start that, developing that as part of our, you know, so you do PE, but you also do, you know, human relationships or whatever we call it. You do that as well, and I think that's another positive start. So I'm not saying the government is going to do that, but there is a review on at the moment, and people like us can argue for those changes to be made as part of that review. That's the role of an MP, to articulate those things. Doesn't mean we always get what we want, but we have the opportunity to do that, and that's one of the ways in which we could make a difference.
Great, thank you. So one question there, and then the last question here at the front.
So from time to time, I like to read Bournemouth Echo, and literally every time I look at it, there's always some article about someone getting stabbed. It seems to be a real issue of knife crime in the UK and Bournemouth as well, of course. And not just knife crime, the wider issue of street gangs and county lines gangs, or not even just knife crime can be that, but it will also be Islamist extremist violence or particular form of far-right violence. So I guess my question is, what will you all do to tackle knife crime in Bournemouth?
Okay, so if we can have the question here at the front, and then we'll...
Hi, my name's Fletcher. I'm a media communication student here. My question is, it's nothing to do with knife crime, but it's to do with scams on the street. The amount of times I've been walking through Bournemouth and somebody has approached me and said, I need money, can you give me money? And my biggest question is there anything that we as a community as well as the MPs could do to maybe start helping people who are like that, and to sort of try and help them find ways to have money instead of asking people for money?
Okay, so two slightly different questions there. One is probably more around sort of gang-related and knife crime, and then the other one was sort of scam, but actually you were looking for kind of support for those individuals to kind of get out of those situations. Tom, do you want to?
In the interest of all of us speaking, I might cover off your question if that's okay, but I would say one thing, which is you often see the negative things that happen in our town in the local paper, and that's inevitable. You've got local journalism unfortunately having to move towards a monetised approach, which means that articles which get more clicks earn them more money, and as a consequence the articles that get more clicks and earn more money are the negative stories. We obviously need to fix local journalism because it's a really important part of our democracy, so that that monetising instinct is reduced. You don't hear about all the amazing positive things that happen in our town. So I guess I would say every time there is a knife crime, it is horrifying, particularly when somebody's life is taken from them. And we need to sit alongside the family and grieve with them and support them and provide what they need. We also do need to put this into context and remind everybody in this room that you are mostly safe. Don't limit your freedoms, don't limit your life because of fear. Continue to live your life. So I just want to make that point. On the question about homelessness and rough sleeping, you've basically hit the nail on the head here. I think there needs to be a revolution in how we actually support homeless people and rough sleepers. We need to get away from a box-ticking exercise, which is what councils and support agencies starved of cash have been required to do. And we need to get into a position where they can actually employ specialist staff with skills around empathy and communication, who can sit alongside somebody sleeping rough and find out why they're sleeping rough, what's happened in their life, what do they need. Because if somebody's sleeping rough, I can tell you from running a homelessness service, they're not going to take keys if you put them into their hands and go straight into a secure tenancy, keep that tenancy and live a happy life. They have had some terrible trauma that's happened to them, and they need the emotional and the mental health support so that they can move along that journey, whether it's off the street into a hostel or a safe space, whether it's from there into receiving the kind of support that they might need, whether it's dentistry, oral hygiene, mental health, emotional, whatever it may be, and then ultimately onto a secure tenancy, which involves them having keys put in their hands, but a caseworker who keeps on seeing them, keeps on supporting them, keeps on making sure they're okay, because that's actually the moment of greatest risk. When somebody has a roof over their head is the moment they usually go back into the streets, because they miss their support network, which will be the people they've slept alongside on the streets, the people who when everybody had let them down or left them out, didn't treat them like a loser, treat them like a person deserving of respect and dignity. And then from there, we've got to make sure that we're working with them to support them to get the healthcare, the employment, the education, the training, whatever they need. We just basically need to hardwire into our public services again that recognition that vulnerable people are humans, they deserve care and compassion, and they deserve support. And it's not hard to do. It really isn't that hard to do.
Okay, I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to move us on to the next topic, unless
Can
you
I
had
be
something
really,
burning.
Can I be really quick
fine.
on
Right,
knife
go for it.
crime, please? Because this is something that we've all campaigned quite heavily on. And I'm working very closely with Tracy Jose, who's Cameron Hamilton's grandmother. She set up a charity called Changes Are Made. And there's a wraparound approach to knife crime, which we're trying to pursue as a government and make relevant locally. First being tougher sentences for possession of a knife. 2 being close all the loopholes on sales, particularly around online sales. And we've recently actually banned, not like the last government said they would do, but actually banned zombie knives and ninja swords. And the third piece is so important, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying on the last question, is the education piece. So how can we get to young people, give them positive opportunities, talk to them about and give them an understanding of the consequences of carrying a knife. So one of the things we're doing with Changes Are Made is just launch a new boxing club for young people in West Howe. We're trying to get funding for a youth hub to be available in Bournemouth to support young people, provide education opportunities, but also really positive activities and role models outside of school and the home.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll move on to the next topic now, just mindful of time, and there will be lots more questions on the next 2 topics as well, I'm sure. So the next one is the NHS mental health, loneliness and health of young people. The state of the student mental health is alarming, and I'm going to give you some sombering statistics. 85% of undergraduate students report experiencing mental health symptoms and difficulties. Number of students disclosing mental health conditions increased 7-fold over the last decade. Confidential surveys find more than half of students self-report mental health issue, and over a quarter had a diagnosed mental health condition. Consequences of students range from poor academic performance, dropping out of university to self-harm and suicide. So the question, I'll come to you, Tom, for this one. Students are increasingly reporting mental health conditions, and there are concerns about the availability, waiting times and quality of mental health services locally. What are your plans to tackle those issues?
I think before I move on to talking about people who are university educated or students, I think we should start again at the beginning, which is that, and I don't like to look in the rearview mirror to throw stones. I'm doing this purely for the purpose of setting context and frankly holding the last government accountable, just as we ought to be held accountable. But children and adolescent mental health waiting lists and waiting times have been abysmal, like absolutely shockingly, horrifically, outrageously abysmal. And that should never, ever have been allowed to happen. To put children and young people in a situation where they have gone through things like a pandemic, cost of living crisis, a whole host of other things, seeing their families really struggle and then deny them speedy, effective mental health support is actually one of the worst things that could be done. So we're now in a situation where this new government is trying to support younger people to get mental health support faster, to get it in the ways that they need, because children will have different needs, young people will have different needs. And as a consequence, they're able to take their education journeys forward, they're able to get supported also within their families, and more broadly are able to start to think about how they thrive again in the future. When I hold surgeries, it's rarely a surgery that goes by where I don't have a mum coming to me talking about their child waiting for mental health support. So it's about investing in that, investing in the workforce. And actually a lot of that workforce can be trained here in Bournemouth. Up at the Royal Bournemouth Hospital, there's an investment in a new medical school which will hopefully develop into something tangible in the next 2 or 3 years in bricks and mortar, actual delivery of services. And that could be a place where we train the mental health professionals that can support younger people. But then if you think about university, as I say, many of the students will have carried the inheritance of the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, and issues that haven't been supported. But I think a lot of people come to university expecting to make their best friends. Going into halls of residence and on your first week going out for Freshers Week and it being fantastic and making those lifelong friends. And I think what I hear from students when I talk with them is that it doesn't work out like that. There's more loneliness than they expected. There's more estrangement. And I think what that speaks to is the need to create a sense of belonging to each other, a belonging to the university, bless you, and a belonging to our town, our place. And when you have that kind of a nourishing environment, bless you.
Are we going for a record?
Yeah, is it going? One more. When you have that as a situation, then people will feel like they're able to really experience university in the way that they wanted to. And I think that's particularly important, not just because, you know, academic studies can be a struggle for some people, partly because they haven't been prepared for that earlier in life. Their primary or secondary school wasn't exactly what they needed it to be. University, going to university in and of itself was a massive big jump, one they're proud of, but one they need support within. But it's also so that we frankly keep as many human beings in this room in Bournemouth, because you are the future of our town's economic growth. You are the future of our town's success. And instead of having to move to Bristol or to London to take up financial careers or video effects careers or whatever it may be, we need you to stay here. And then when we get to the conversation about housing, I'll talk a bit more about how we can make that happen.
Perfect, thank you. I'll open it up to the floor then. Who wants to? Oh, there's a
Ooh,
lot of
gosh.
hands there. Oh, crikey. Right, so we'll go here. Lady who hasn't asked a question, and then we'll go right at the back. There we go. Yeah.
Hi, so I'm Zara, and I'm currently Leighton Mark champion, and our second most voted on the ballot was health and wellbeing, but before that I was a member of Youth Parliament for about 2 years, 2022 to 2024. So, although that's been mentioned, I would like to bring attention to the fact that I'm from a really low-income area. So I lived in West Toale, previously stated, and as a lot of you will know, it's a very, very poorly funded area. So it's a council estate where county lines is more common than puddles, which we live in Britain, there's a lot of puddles. So the main thing I want to draw attention to is waiting times and, quite frankly, prioritisation of different types of diagnoses. So I was recently accepted into a private school, which by no means could I pay for. I'm on scholarship, and within the first month of me being there, I was picked up for having ADHD, which I'm here to tell you guys, 1 month, I'm 17, so that's 17 years of state schools not picking up on it. My brother also, he wasn't picked up on having severe autism until he was expelled from 3 different schools, pushed out of Tregonwell, which as we know is a really, really hard school to get pushed out of. And quite frankly, he's now living outside of education at the age of 15 and pushed into county lines because of not only where we live, but because of these waiting times and the state of CAMS at the moment, quite frankly, as we all know, again, is abysmal. This by no means is a huge criticism of the effort that the government's putting in, I do see that, but with the waiting list the way it is, 5 years I think it is, there is no way for us to not go into the private sector if you can afford it, which being said, if you go to the NHS with a privatised diagnosis, they will then refuse you medication because technically anybody can go to a private doctor's office, which kind of defeats the point of going if you can't actually get treatment. And I'm just wondering, what are we doing to actually mitigate waiting times, intervention in things like primary school, to stop people like my brother from falling into county lines as a form of education, which, as stupid as it sounds, it really is, because they are learning maths, they're learning business sense, they're learning how to earn money, and although it is awful, it is a very real reality for most of our constituents. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Waiting times and diagnosis. Lady here in the black jumper, and then right at the back there. Lady here, no, at the front.
Hello, I'm Hannah, and I would like to bring attention to the NHS. There's not a lot of staff in, for example, Bournemouth Hospital, and recently a lot of staff has been taken to different places, for example, the emergency department, because people have been on the edge of death, but still need to wait days to get attention. They have needed to reach extra support because they're not getting the actual support they need. other staff are being taken in, they don't have enough staff to stay on every section that they need to, because they're all going to people who are engaged and still need to wait days and weeks to get the attention they need. And there's less and less staff because they're being put in amazing pressure, and they don't feel like this is positive experience for them, and they don't want to do it anymore because they feel like the pressure is being put on them as not helping the people who need the help. And I'm wondering what would make better the lifestyle of NHS who might want extra help in a way, because the pressure being put on them, the situations are being put on them. And
okay, now that's wonderful, thank you. So I think we'll take 2 more questions. So gentleman there with that hat, and then the lady with the white jumper at the back.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey. This question is to Tom, or any other person can take the question as well. I'm coming from the aspect of the international students. Bournemouth has seen a significant record of international students coming in, and Tom, for what you just said in your last statement about retaining students and retaining economy and all of that, part of our core values, one of the values we look at as the student union is attracting talents to BU. Now, we have lots of talents from the international students, but the challenge we face as international students is getting those jobs that would sponsor us to stay here. That's been a big challenge. Graduation just happened a couple of weeks ago, and we've seen tons of students leave Bournemouth because they don't have jobs that would keep them here. What can be done to help this situation?
Okay, and then the lady in the white jumper at the back.
Hi, my name's Abby and I'm a journalism student here. I'm originally from Southampton, where I was under the care of Southampton Children's Hospital since I was really quite young. And quite frankly, they kept me alive, and my transition from children's to adults was quite smooth. I felt weirdly at home in the hospital. It came a point of familiarity in my life, but when I moved across to Bournemouth, the story was quite different. I had to move GPs because there was a dispute over where my main address was, and as a result of this, a lot of my care, I couldn't get funding for it to continue in Southampton, so I was discharged from services who, a lot of them were transition services, so I've been under them since I was 14. And I don't think it's necessarily an issue that people talk about. People who move away to uni and are moving to different GPs and hospitals, and I'm under a GP surgery that doesn't know me and doesn't know the complexities of my issues. I'm having to wait on quite long waiting lists to see the specialities that I need to see. Even things such as the medicines dispensary is different in Bournemouth as it is in Southampton, so quite a lot of my prescription medications I had to change the type or just come off them completely. So I just was wondering if there are any plans to sort of integrate NHS services between areas, because I know that I'm definitely not the only person that's been left kind of stranded since moving to uni.
Okay, thank you. And then I've got a lady in white here, so if we could just pass the microphone across. And then I'll go to the panel. Don't worry, I made some notes about what the questions were.